I suppose the pressure, I can only put it down to that because it was I suppose it was a very poor exhibition of football, a lot of mistakes made, but then again, when you look at it, you don't understand the pressure that the players are under nowadays out on the ground, I believe. And if this is the case, then you can excuse a lot of the errors. I think that Brereton was a little bit unfortunate there. Had he marked that ball, had he kicked the goal, he probably would have gone on and been one of the star players. It may have destroyed his confidence a little bit there. But I think it was it 2 goals 8 or 2 goals 9 they were. There was atrocious kicking, very low scores, and all the players, I think they were actually playing on mistakes of the other team. Buckenara, I thought, did very well in the centre for them. I thought that was a good move. Of course, Dool had an outstanding first quarter. He was one of the real stalwarts of the game. I thought Klomp didn't do too badly for the start of the match either. Oh, I don't know about the television set, but still, they did do well. And a lot of the planning that went into the game obviously came off because the Hawthorn team couldn't get their game mobile, and of course, in return, Carlton were taken to the ground very heavily all the time, and at one stage I didn't think that Hawthorn were going to get right away from them had they been able to score, but they couldn't put the results on the board. It was only just at the finish of the quarter when Kennedy went in to kick the goal, it made a big difference.
A couple of vital goals missed by Buckenara and Matthews, 2 by Buckenara and Matthews.
Well, this was later on though. I'm talking about the first quarter. Kennedy, I thought, did very well in the first quarter, but it was evident that neither of the teams could really fire up and play the game that they wanted to because of the pressure of the game. But it did look, I suppose, as a spectacle, one wouldn't want to be very happy about it. But against that, you've got to appreciate just what happens out on the ground.
How did you score the star players, Bob?
Well, for me, Austin was the champion of the day because not only did he play extremely well himself, but you've got to realise the difficulty of his task. He's playing on a champion. He had to be able to beat the champion, or at least negate the champion, and play well himself, and that's exactly what he did. So I couldn't see that there's Kennedy going in now. He played a great, that was just on the siren for them. But I gave 3 votes to Austin. I gave 2 votes to Mark, who I thought played extremely well and was one of the prime movers of Carlton when they were struggling to do so. And I gave 1 vote to Russ, who I thought in the first half especially played extremely well, got a lot of kicks, and in the third quarter died a little bit, but at the finish was trying equally as hard.
John Newman, how did you see the second quarter?
Well, Ron, I thought it was one of the most untidy games of football I've seen for a long time, and I believe Carlton were far too cocky in the first half of that game, and as a result of that, they were very loose on the back line. And had it been, if Hawthorn had been able to capitalise on Carlton's looseness on the back line, they would have been well ahead at half-time, but they weren't able to do it. And I'm sure David Parkin at half-time impressed on his charges to tighten up and play the football that enabled them to get them into the finals, into this position of the year, and asked them to play proper football, because I thought it was a very, very amateurish performance early in the game. I thought that Fitzpatrick there, who we see remonstrating with O'Halloran for a very fair and legitimate tackle, but unfortunately that was paid down the ground. I thought Fitzpatrick, who came onto the ball in the second half, I can't understand why they don't put him on the ball at the start of the game, because he is the only legitimate ruckman, perhaps with Gary Dempsey playing the game today. And they're obviously saving him for the second half. There's Bazusto, who came back, and Bazusto is not a percentage player. He doesn't do the percentage things in football. He's a very vital cog in that side if he just knuckled down and did some of the hard things, but he's far too flamboyant as far as I'm concerned, or he was yesterday. The only runners that Carlton had, I felt yesterday, were Hunter, who played a very nice game, Marcoux, Austin and English. Now English is has been a very handy player in the finals, in fact, and there's another player I'd like to mention who I don't know if he came on. Did he come on? Clark. When did he come onto the game?
In the third quarter.
Well, Clark. I said he'd kick 3 goals. I believe they can't actually afford to go into the grand final next week without Clark on that side, because he can come on and kick 2 or 3 goals when he comes on, Ron.
How did you score the players yesterday?
I was exactly the same as Bob. I was 1 vote to English, who was very good in the back line, 2 to Marcoux and 3 to Austin, who was superb.
How did you see the third quarter, Doug Wade?
Well, it was a very interesting third quarter, Ron. It was just as John was saying about David Clark, he came on and kicked those 2 quick goals, and so did Marcoux, and I think that was the quarter which, and it always is in tight games, the third quarter is usually the quarter that sets the side up that's going to win the game. There you see Austin coming down, and Fitzpatrick and Payton. Payton didn't have any say at all into the ruck, and it was only in this third quarter, as you see Marcoux kick a goal there, but it was only in this quarter that in fact Fitzpatrick came into the ruck. Jones was doing most of the work early, and Fitzpatrick did a serviceable game in the ruck. Tuck was down at centre-half forward for Hawthorn at this stage. Bortolotto was playing very well, and as we see there, Perovic and also Hunter coming into the game. English, I tossed up between English and, in fact, Rosso from a third player. English played a great game for Carlton, and was a very, very solid game of defence, so too with Plump. But it was a quarter which Carlton, you could see them setting themselves up for the win, and they got out of the tackling, this fierce tackling of Hawthorn, and it was in this quarter, as I said, that you could felt that they were going to go on. In that third quarter, unfortunately for them, Goad kicked a couple of goals, but Buckenaro missed one, and also Matthews missed a goal in this third quarter, which perhaps could have set up Hawthorn's win. But all in all, it was certainly Carlton's quarter with a lot of good snap goals.
Doug, how did you score the players, Doug?
I gave exactly the same as Bob Davis, but so was John, except you put in a different player. Did you give him
English.
one? English, you put in English, yeah. No, Bob had Russo. Russo to 1 vote, I gave him 1, I gave Marcoux 2 and Austin 3.
Okay, we'll be back with more from our commentators in just a moment.
Right,
Peter McKenna, take us through the last quarter.
Well, I think if Hawthorn were to get back into the game, they certainly had to have some forwards firing. I think that was their big problem right throughout the day, that their key forwards were held. Byrne was well held up there in the forward pocket. Lee Matthews, of course, was held there, up there by Curly Austin. And generally, they didn't have a key forward. John Kennedy was a little bit down on form. He did a couple of good things. But generally, the Carlton backline was just far too strong. Hawthorn tried hard to get back into the game, but English and Perovic in that last line of defence far too strong and playing very, very close. There's Russo having a shot for goal, who played a great game, and he certainly didn't let Hawthorn down. But that was a case there that Byrne was appealing for the mark. They eventually got the free kick. But those tough Carlton defenders, Dool, they stick to you all the time. Austin, there you see him running down the ground receiving a handball. But they're a very professional final side, the Carlton side. They must have a very good side, Lou, if you can bring on players like Marcassani and Clark.
I think you've got to give a bit of credit to Bazasto, who had been held pretty well all day and became a bit of a match win in that last quarter.
Well, Bazasto, I thought, and particularly in the first half, was very well held, and all of a sudden, Lou, he got back a bit of that old magical touch, and I think that'll do him a lot of good as far as the grand final goes next week. There's Malin, who I thought was a pretty quiet player, and Glascott didn't play his usual great game, but he's always in there boring in, trying hard, Glascott, and they've got a tremendously adaptable side. There's Ashman. Ashman wasn't a dominant player, but everything he did was all class.
How did you score the players?
Well, I gave 1 vote to Des English in the back pocket, a good, strong, determined game, and went onto the ball for a while and played particularly well there. 2 votes to Alex Marcoux, his tremendous acceleration off the mark, and that's what's important in football. And I gave 3 votes to Rod Austin for a tremendous game. Not only did he contain Lee Matthews, but he also was an attacking player as well.
Jack, what did you think of yesterday's game?
I think it was the worst football I have seen for many, many years, Ron. You expect it in the finals, but you don't expect it so bad.
It could be you're getting a bit old, Jack.
I could be a bit mellow. But when you have a look at some of the mistakes that those supposed to be senior footballers made yesterday.
What sort of mistakes, Jack?
Well, he punched it to the full back. He punched it to the full forward.
You dream of that, Jack, don't you?
You go to bed dreaming of a Friday night. Well, the bloke punched it to me so I can kick a goal.
Well, that's
the other side.
You're talking about
the
Robertson,
kicking
are
was
you?
shocking. I don't know who it was. I didn't care at that stage. But I would say that it was
what about the 15-metre penalty? What would you do?
Well, you know what you've got to do with football if you're going to improve it. Otherwise, I'll get no one there in the finish the way it's going.
What have you got to do?
No one there at all. They had 15 hand passes one time without kicking the ball. That was shocking. Anyone can hand pass the ball. You don't be good to hand pass the ball. The other one was the 15-metre penalty. Now, if you want to do away with it, that tackling, put them down and let them kick a goal. Give a penalty right in front of goals and get rid of it right out of the joint. So it'll put men back in business again. That white line, get rid of that white line It is the most shocking thing I've ever seen in my life.
You got a real
They've
phobia
made
about the white line,
ruckman
Jack.
into girls.
Well, Jack
They have
should
made-
have, but he didn't
we're coming back to the football.
You got a real phobia about
Buckanara.
the white line, haven't
Oh, the white line. It's unbelievable, it is. Fair dinkum, blokes playing football, you wouldn't allow them in your second 18.
Jack, if you were coach of the side in that third quarter when Buckanara missed those 2 goals and Matthews missed them, what would be your reaction?
I don't know what I'd do. I'd went straight to the river, I reckon, straight in. But that's where they lost it. That was the turning point of the game there, because they had a beautiful run on that stage. Buckanara and Matthews were coming home, and all of a sudden they missed 3 goals. You could see him go down, just that fraction. You could see him go
Jack,
down.
there's no doubt the winning move was placing Austin on Matthews and tagging him. Now, if you'd have been Matthews, what would have been your tactics back towards Austin? Now, come on, be honest about it. If you got enough nerve.
Now, wait a minute. It's a professional game.
What would you have done
It's
to
a professional game.
Yes.
It's a So they're going to bring something back into the game that should be out of the game. Enforcers.
Yeah.
Enforcers.
But
They're
how can
going
you...
to-
But how would
Jack,
you have handled Austin yourself?
How could you... you used to be able to enforce because they had one umpire that
I
could
would
give
have
up
put
the
Austin
game.
under my arm and walked him off the ground and put him over the Watson. That's what I would have done.
Bob Davis doesn't
God.
agree
But
that's
what-
how you should play, Jack.
As strange as it may seem, I don't think that Bob's a good judge. Neither some of these blokes are bad judges, but I've agreed with him. You couldn't believe it. I gave Russo 1 vote. I thought he was a terrific. Ron, when you're going bad, that's when you find your footballers. And Russo, he
Good work,
bobbed up
Jack.
beautiful too. What's more, Marku had that extra bit of pace that made the difference between all those slow rovers, and he got away in the open. And the other fella, Austin, I dipped my lip.
Well, it
I
makes me
dipped my
very
lip.
sad to think I've got to agree with Jack with the same 3 votes. But, Jack, you've got to realise that with Austin, he's bigger than you and he would possibly carve you up.
He's about
He's
5'8"
taller than
or
you.
something, isn't he?
Jack,
5'8"
Austin is
and
taller
weighs
than you
about
are.
4 stone or something. Yeah,
Austin
you've got
is
just
taller than you, Jack.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Right, the aggregate of scores yesterday, and bearing in mind that there's $500 for the player of the final series from the Wales, and the aggregate showed that Austin was the winner of the score yesterday. What about next week, gentlemen? Richmond?
About 8.
I like Richmond, yes.
Well, I like Carlton, Ron.
Do you?
I really think that...
Oh, damn it. He can't fire. He's all right.
Well, we'll sit here next week and you'll be able to say that to me.
I won't count.
Peter?
I like Carlton. I reckon they're a tremendous
There's another
final
one.
side. A great
been runners up for a
They'll
while.
put the pressure on Richmond next week, Jack, and they'll beat them.
What?
They'll put the
Peter?
pressure on. I'm tipping for
Doug?
Carlton.
I'll go for Carlton. I think that they'll come bounce back.
No wonder they
Well, we're the only 3 on this panel that have played football in the last 10 years, the last 30 years. Well, at least we know something about
I
it.
don't think you
It's
played
the
a
greatest
Carlton.
joke of all
You was
time. The
Martin's man,
Tigers
weren't
are set up to win this one. They will be slaughtered.
Who asked you? Ron hasn't asked you
This
yet.
is gone. It'll be Richmond, ladies and gentlemen.
You haven't picked,
Richmond.
you haven't picked the winner this
What
series.
about Carlton?
That's the end of it.
What about Collingwood?
You haven't picked a winner
right.
this series. You haven't picked a winner this series. You haven't picked
The
a
only winner
this
you've
series.
picked is Edna.
Great space in Collins Place. Well, we've launched Grand Final week, and I'm certain it's going to be an exciting one, culminating in next Saturday's Grand Final at the MCG. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next Sunday in World of Sport for our Grand Final edition of the program. And of course, tomorrow night it'll be Brownlow medal time, 8:30, live telecast from the Southern Cross Hotel. So be with us then. Until then, goodbye from the great space in Collins Place.